church, I've become familiar with also the Litvisher world. I was 2 years ago in Bet Shemesh, and I opened up a kollel in Bet Shemesh, and I had the chance to meet Rabbi Chaim Malinowitz, Olav Hasholem. You might have heard the name. He was a massive Talmud Chacham, probably a Baki in Shas, and the chief editor of the English art scroll, Schottenstein Gemaras. And he invited me in to teach Tanya in his Litvisher shul. So I've had exposure. You're talking to a Lubavitcher who's not narrow-minded, but very, very expansive. And I have a hard hat, so I can hear, get good knocks and rebound, so I'm not scared of anything anyone will say. I won't be insulted unless it's, outrageous and disgusting. I'll cut you off. But otherwise, I've heard it all, and it's fine. And the way I write my books, if you've read them, and I hope you'll read more, is I try to understand both sides. And I present as much as possible a fair, balanced study that I come to, and allow my reader to decide what he wants to do with that. So in Satmar Lubavitch, if you want to say Satmar's right, Lubavitch is wrong, no problem. If you want to say Lubavitch is right, no problem. If you want to say both are right or both are wrong, no problem. But at least I've presented to you a full plate, and the same is true in this presentation. So Chabad Lubavitch goes back 200 plus years to the Balatanya Reb Shneir Zalman in Lozhna, where he started. And of course, his magnum opus is the Sefer HaTanya that I'm sure you've heard of. The Rosh Yeshiva that made Ner Yisrael famous, Rabbi Ruderman, was someone who in his youth, he said himself, he studied Tanya, and he came from a Lubavitcher family, and he had familiarity with Chabad and Lubavitch back in Russia. And although later, the yeshiva opposed the Tanya Shir both inside and outside of the yeshiva, which is a discussion for itself, and not for today, for another time, because I might write about it if I decide to write about Ner Yisrael and Lubavitch. That will be included in that piece of work. But Lubavitch is a Chassidus. A Chassidus begins with the Baal Shem Tov, Reb Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, the founder. It doesn't begin with the Reb Shneir Zalman, because the Baal Shem Tov had this idea, and what was his idea? That the neshama is the ikr, the soul is the ikr by a Jew. What a Jew knows as far as his lumdus and his yedias, his knowledge is secondary to who he is. The Baal HaTanya explains this at great length in chapter 32, the Lev of Tanya, if you care to follow up on it to understand. But the Nakuda was already from the Baal Shem Tov. And the Baal Shem Tov had a select group of Talmidim, and one of them who became the most known and successor was Reb Dov Ber of Mezrich, known as the Maggid of Mezrich. And he had formal Talmidim. So after his passing in 1772, his Talmud, Reb Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk, took over, but then in 1778, I believe, he left to 1778 or 1788, I forget now. He left to Eretz Yisrael with another Talmud or two and a whole group of Hasidim, and they were kind of the origins of the Hasidic movement in Tveria and Tzfas in Eretz Yisrael. And they left over Reb Shneir Zalman to be the head of the Hasidic movement in White Russia. Not Chabad, all Hasidim in White Russia. Reb Shneir Zalman at some point took this germ of teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, Einoid Milvada, Yivdus Hashem B'Simcha, Hashgacha Protis, on every detail. And again, everything is a topic for itself to explain it, but we don't have the time. He took this and he said, let's now use kind of the Lithuanian, the Litvak, analytical and intellectual approach to it. Okay, the Baal Shem Tov was from Podalia, the Carpathian Mountains, and Mezrich was also, they were more Polish and Galicia and Romanian, and they were a different style, you could say more emotional. The Baal HaTanya is called, before he came to the Maggid, he was called the Litvak. He was known as a Litvak. And in fact, it says in some of our writings that before he became a Chassid, he opposed Chassidim. He opposed the concept of Chassidim, like the Vilna Gaon and his students. And the Balatanya came to the Maggid. He was impressed. There's a whole story, how it happened, why it happened, when it happened. But the bottom line is he became a chassid of the Maggid. And this Litvak all of a sudden saw a Jew not for his learning and his knowledge, but for who he is, the neshama. And if you're looking at a yid for the neshama by all of us is the same. And to quote his chapter 32, what he says there is, how do you know someone who outwardly doesn't seem to be such a great Talmud Chacham and knowledgeable of Torah and all that, maybe he has a greater neshama than you, the Talmud Chacham, and the one who's steiging away 24/7. Okay, very revolutionary, and he explained it, and he explains it. So Chabad, Chochma Bina Das, it's an acronym for the components of the mind, to understand everything. So just like you guys are learning Yeshiva, you understand that you take out the Reb Chaim, you take out a Maram Shif, Reb Yosef Engel, a Ktsos, and you want to get down to it, you really get into it. It's not just lip service or even just knowing much by heart, but it's really Havana v'Hasbara. The Balatanya introduced that to Hasidus. And it was a big revolution within the Hasidic world because they weren't used to this approach. And frankly, even till today, it's a big revolution in the Hasidic world. Forget about the Litvak world. We'll talk about that in a moment. But in the Hasidic world, it's a revolution. They're not used to thinking about God's spheros, 10 emanations. And there's Chochmah number 1, and Malchus is number 10. What's the virtue of Chochmah? Why is it 1? And what's the virtue of 10? And how do they interrelate? You know, we're saying Sfiras Omer. I don't know if it's your minute. Is it your minute to say Chesed Shebe Gevura, Gevur Sheb Chesed? I think it is, right? I'm not sure. I don't know if all Litvas should do that. But these concepts require a lot of seichel. You can't just shuckle. Shake and bake won't get you anywhere. You got to understand. You have to use your cup. You have to use your head. So this was a big chiddush. And for 200 plus years, the 7 Rebbes of Lubavitch have been going at it, teaching Hasidus. What's Hasidus? Maimorim. Right? Tanya is the magnum opus. It's like the Rambam's Yada Chazaka, the Sefer of Sefer, or the Reb Chaim of Rambam is Reb Chaim, right? So if you want to understand Rambam, you have to understand the Reb Chaim. Without Reb Chaim, you can't really understand really what the Rambam is saying and deeply and all that. So the Tanya is that way for Chabad Chassidus and for Chassidus in general. I say in general, you should know that Ger, Vishnitz, and the other Hasidic movements, their Rebbes studied Hasidus, and then you can detect it in their writings. So studied Chabad Hasidus. So Chabad Hasidus, the Alter Rebbe brought to the world, and his successors, the Lubavitcher Rebbes, became a mainstay of understanding well a piece of Hasidus. When we talk about Hasidus of the Baal Shem Tov, there's another important yesod, foundation that he brought to the world, and that's called a Rebbe, a Hasidic master. Think of it as a go'oin, a genius of understanding neshama, the soul. See, Hasidus, so what I'm getting at, Hasidus is all about the neshama. It's all about the soul. It's not about the tangible. It's not about the material. It needs to express itself in the material, but its ethos, its essence, its nekuda is neshama. So the Baal Shem Tov teaches that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us and gives us a Moshe Rabbeinu in every generation, and tzaddikim, and not tzaddikim in the classical Talmudic sense of the Gemara and Brachos. You know, mechza beinani, roiv zechuya is tzaddik. The Balatanya, by the way, in the first page, it addresses this whole issue, the 5 categories. But what's his conclusion? Tzaddik, beinani, and Russia, which are the 3, and then there's 2 within each, hence there's 5 categories, are talking about different aspects of the soul, what's going on inside. How much shtus or bad have you eliminated? How much is still left? And what's going on internally? And it's so it's not a discussion about reward and punishment. Do I have more reward or punishment? That's true in halachic terms. Of course, it's a Gemara. No one denies that. There's schar v'einish. But nevertheless, if you want to understand yourself, who are you and where are you? It's about the essence, about the neshama. So it's a whole other equation and a whole other assessment. So therefore, we take a person like a Moshe Rabbeinu, a tzaddik, a rebbe, and we say that this individual was gifted by Hashem with a neshama that stands out than anyone else. Not that other people cannot attain it. There's discussion about that, whether you're born a tzaddik or you can become a tzaddik. I don't want to go into that right now. But the bottom line is that a tzaddik is someone that has transformed himself. So the Gemara says in Brachos that David HaMelech, he did his thing with Bathsheba and everything else. And the Gemara says, Hargu B'tainis, he killed his Yetzer Hara. So David HaMelech worked on himself. That according to the Gemara, according to Chassidus, it's a whole different explanation. But according to the Gemara, he was not a tzaddik, and he became a tzaddik because he was able to harg b'tainas his Yetzer Hara. What we understand is, and the Alter Rebbe brings that, by the way, in chapter 1 of Tanya. What we understand from this is that what a chassid needs to have a rebbe, and it believes in a person who is a human being, but his connection is clear. There's no interruption, there's no static. Why? Because he has hargu b'tainas, like the Gemara regarding David HaMelech. So Hasidim believe that their Rebbe is on par of a Moshe Rabbeinu and a David HaMelech. Again, whether the same or not the same, that's another discussion. But the overall idea is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives every generation not just someone who's a good Rav, and a great Rosh Yeshiva, and a great Manik, those are all true, but that's not a Rebbe. A Rebbe is, listen to these words, a soul geologist. What's a soul geologist? Just like you bring someone who understands stones. Look at this stone. Is this stone worth this amount or that amount? And what's with this stone? You have to be a maven. If you're not a geologist, you don't understand what you're looking at. A Rebbe is someone, when you come to him, he doesn't see your nose. He doesn't just see your nose and your eyes and your hair and your yarmulke and your beard. No beard. He sees what's going on inside. What is going on inside? Where are you? Where are you coming from? What happened in the past? Where do you want to go to? And based on that, and again, why does he have that? Because he has argu b'tainis, he's a holy person, and he senses that about you. So he tells you, you belong in Wyoming, and you belong in Chicago, and you should be an engineer, you should be a Rav, and you should go to Kiruv, and you should go to college. Everyone, if you ask him, he senses what your soul needs to fulfill its mission on earth. That is a basic belief of all Hasidim, not just Chabad. So being that Chabad Lubavitch, is part of the Baal Shem Tov model, it's a Hasidic group. So I just wanted to spend a few minutes on making it clear that before we jump to Chabad Lubavitch, we have to know it's called the Chabad Lubavitcher Hasidim. And Hasidim begins with Baal Shem Tov, as I said before. Then we get to Chabad, which is the understanding and kind of the Litvak approach to Hasidus, okay? But not to remain aloof, cold, apathetic, and removed, but to be integrated into our lives in a warm way. A chassid was always known, we say in Yiddish, avara meyid. Avara means a warm person. He's a warm person, both in his human relationships and in his godly relationships. So the Lubavitcher chassid, you could see him davening Shabbos for hours, and not that he got up at 10, 11 o'clock. He got up at 5, 6, but he was learning in the morning for 2, 3 hours, and then he meditated. And he was mizboinen on Gadlus Hashem, as it's brought in the Shulchan Aruch. And then he davened Mila b'Mila, and he cried, and he laughed, etc., etc. So this is the Warmkeit, the warmth within the Chassid. So this is the world of Lubavitch. It's brief, it's not an elaborate explanation, and just to conclude this section, all of this came to America with the previous Lubavitch Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, in 1940. He passes on in 1950. The last Lubavitch Rebbe becomes the Rebbe in 1951, and until his passing in Gimel Tammuz, Tov 1994, and he was ill for